This is a Fangirls Going Rogue priority transmission.
All team, give it everything you got!
It's time to fangirl flail with Fangirls Going Rogue.
Count me in.
Never get between a Mandalorian and a weapons package.
This is the way.
News, discussion, and commentary from the female point of view.
You call this a diplomatic solution?
No, I call it aggressive negotiations.
She's as important as he is.
With your hosts, Trisha Barr and Sarah Woloski.
Boy, am I glad to hear your voice.
Strap in, because this is where the fun begins.
I like the sound of that.
Happy Star Wars Month! I'm Trisha Barr, one of the hosts of Fangirls Going Rogue. May 4th is upon us, and with that Star Wars-y day, plenty of fresh content drops on Disney+, including Young Jedi Adventures and Star Wars Visions Season 2. I had a chance to attend the Visions Creator Press Conference at Celebration Europe last month. If you're not sure about the anthology series from animation companies around the world, then listening to the writers and directors who played in the Galaxy Far, Far Away's sandbox for Season 2 will get you inspired. If you've watched Visions, the discussion here will heighten what you've seen. The panel is hosted by Edith Bowman, a stellar podcaster in her own right. I'm off to rewatch Season 2, Episode 1, The Sith. Be sure to check out social media at FG Going Rogue for more May the 4th content. And without further ado, the Star Wars Vision Season 2 press conference from Celebration Europe.
James Wall, Jackie Lopez, and Josh Rhimes. Welcome to the panel. And we also have filmmakers from each studio. From Elvira Rodrigo Blas, Paul Young from Cartoon Saloon, Gabriel Osorio from Punk Robot, Magdalena Osinka from Aardman, Kyung-Rin Park from Studio Mia, Julian Chen from Studio La Cachette, Melinda D. Schindler from 88 Pictures, Leandre Thomas from Lucasfilm, Arthur Isson from the Dark Shaquille, and Nadia Dias and Daniel Clark from Triggerfish. Welcome everyone. Please make yourself comfortable. Congratulations on a wonderful panel downstairs. It's so exciting. May the 4th feels within touch and distance now. It's so exciting. James, Jackie, and Josh, if you don't mind, I'd like to start with you guys. Congratulations on this wonderful opportunity that you've given storytellers. It really is a beautiful, beautiful thing. James, when did you know that you wanted to expand this galaxy and take Visions into a second volume?
Well, I think we always knew we wanted to. I think we knew we had something special, and I think hearing from the first volume set of creators who were sort of said how wonderful it was to get this sort of blank canvas to tell the stories they've always wanted to tell within this galaxy that meant so much to them. So we knew we wanted to. I think the truth is you just never know how it's going to land, especially something like this that's so outside the norm of what we've been doing with Star Wars. And I think when we started seeing the fandom and the joy from it, we knew instantly that it was time to start talking about a volume 2. So pretty soon after, but it really was the audience response that allowed us to do it.
And that beautiful thing as well of seeing the potential that the rest of the world had to offer in terms of translating those stories with animation. Jackie, in terms of deciding where you were going to go and who was going to get to tell these stories, that could have been an easy journey. A fun one, but maybe not easy.
Yeah, it was not easy. There's so many incredible, talented people out there, but I do have my favorites. And also just wanting to keep it global and looking at what interesting work was being done at different studios around the world. It was such a passion project for us, and just looking at so much work from around the globe, and there was no shortage of choices, that's for sure.
Can I just add on that? I think that's what we noticed with Volume 1, and I just said it on the panel, was that there was such a specific cultural perspective on Star Wars from Japan. And I think we were all asking ourselves right from the start, would that be different in Africa? Would that be different from India? And the answer is yes. And so that was part of the story we wanted to tell, was let's really celebrate all that diversity and that different perspective of Star Wars.
And that different diversity of animation styles as well. I imagine that was a big pull and wonderful opportunity to see what all these fantastic, talented storytellers were coming back with in terms of their interpretation. Was that a highlight for you?
Absolutely. I think, seeing cultural perspectives from around the world conveyed in so many different styles of animation with so many different techniques. Like I said, CGI, hand-drawn 2D, using ink in really inventive ways like Cartoon Saloon, Rodrigo's use of color. It just goes on and on. The making CGI feel like stop motion, and then Aardman actually using stop motion, creating this amazing world in Star Wars. So I think it exceeded all of our expectations.
It's this beautiful thing that's a celebration of how there's never an end point with animation. It can constantly be developed. It can constantly embrace different things, different techniques, go back to old techniques, bring them in with new. And I think that's another thing that this wonderful second volume really does as well. Congratulations on Sith, Rodrigo. It's a beautiful and brilliant film. Star Wars, and I'd like to go down the panel if it's okay for you guys to mind. Hello down the end, down. Just that idea that obviously Star Wars is part of the inspiration for this. It's take this world and go and create and tell stories. What was the other thing for you all, and I'll come down if that's okay, that you drew inspiration from? Star Wars was one side of it. What was the other side that you drew inspiration from?
First of all, I think is a testament to these people here, right? Jackie, James, and Josh, and how courageous of a choice what they made in terms of giving kind of the reins or letting us, speak and tell our own stories. So, in making that step and taking that step, it allows, I think, these creators, to bring part of their history, their learning through the creative process. Particular for me was, I said it in the panel, was, how, could use, the Force to create art. So part of that journey was, can you, use color, use painting, inspired by a lot of painters from the 20th century. We looked a lot to Miro, Picasso, and kind of looking at that and saying would this be inspiring to connect with Star Wars somehow? Yeah. And I think when you start mixing those different things that means a lot to you personally and you write it, that's when I think the magic happens, right?
Yeah, Paul, I love the idea that you said about Marian mythology. Marian the mythology of Star Wars with the mythology of Ireland. Was that a kind of starting point for you?
Yeah, I mean the initial starting point was we did want to set something in kind of like a Kerry in a galaxy far, far away. That kind of a vibe, and I obviously was inspired by Tom Moore and Nora Toomey, my partners in Cartoon Saloon, and all the work they'd done and all the artists that worked on that. So when we came up, I think when we came up with the idea, it's funny, as you start writing and working together, you start to get to know the character. You really start to get in the head of your main character. So the little things from me came up from my childhood when I started thinking about Dal leaving her hometown. Our story is a little bit like a kid who kind of wants to get away from a bad place. And it was not that where I come from was a beautiful place, but I got to go to university where some of my friends didn't. And that idea of sort of not wanting to tell your friends you got this great ticket out of here and then leaving and then feeling a bit guilty about it. So there's certain things that you can attach to the character you're working with emotionally for yourself, which is important, which Tom and Nora always do. And then we just were inspired by kind of Irish. We were inspired by a particular kind of sort of Irish ghost stories as well as anything else. So it is kind of a ghost story with a twist or film at the end, as well as this kind of emotional journey for this one character, Dal, and friends. Yeah, so it's just it's funny when you start to write the characters start to inspire you. Yeah. They start to form, and then you suddenly, this could be really interesting. Get to know this person. You know, so that's kind of it, and inspired by all the people I'm working with. I mean, they taught me. This is my first time directing, so I mean, I'd been producing for over 20 years, but it was great. Tom and Nora encouraged me. You know, you should have a goal now. You've been traveling around being a traveling salesman for a while, but now with companies, it's such a place to have a go. And then Jackie happened to ring up the team and said, "Would you like to do this?" And it was just as I was thinking, I'd love to do a sci-fi. You know, I'd love to do a science fiction in the cartoon style. You know, and so it was just an amazing opportunity coming along at the right time.
Right. Gabriel, talking on the idea of these characters and, you know, in the stars and this relationship between these siblings is really beautiful and really something that's celebrated in your story. And going back to what Paul was saying, did that relationship really inspire the story as well in a way?
Yeah, I think mostly the relationship between the sisters and with their mother and all the loss that they have to endure. And I think that relationship for us is really, really important because as a studio, we always try to define ourselves, trying to think what we are contributing to society, what kind of messages we are putting out there, so we can, you know, reflect in ourselves and see how can we do better, you know. So yeah, that the relationship and the relation that they had with their mother and how they lose their mother and everything because of the empire, that was really important for us because it's inspiring in actual story, in something that is a struggle until this day in Chile. You know, I grew up seeing Star Wars, and when I see the Empire oppressing these people, these rebels, I always thought, you know, like I can see this in my country, like you know, every day. You know, this is still happening. So it was a very natural for us to tell that story.
And a beautiful one it is. Magdalena, yes to the mums.
Yes.
Yes to the mums. I was watching a panel the other day, and so many people who were asked were coming out on the stage going, "Oh yeah, well my dad showed me Star Wars and stuff." I'm like, "What about the mums?" And then I was like, "Yes, this is a mum story." And to be honest, there's so many of your films that have such brilliant, strong female characters. Pretty much all of your stories are really driven by female strength, I think, and it's so beautiful to see. But for you, this was just these characters in this relationship, and also the other mother-daughter relationships within the film are really, it must have been kind of really personal and beautiful to use that as inspiration.
Yeah, exactly, yeah. And that's, true, that there is not that many films about mothers, and one of my previous shorts I did about father-son relationship, and I was thinking, why am I even, I'm a female, but I think because I'm a mother now, and I went through pregnancy, 9 months of carrying this child, giving birth, feeding with my own body. I'm a superhuman, right? So I think being a mother now, I understand that mothers are really superhumans, and they are incredible, they're amazing. And it also made me realize that I should have really appreciated my mom at times much more. Because she's taught me so much. She's always been super motivating. Yes, I'm from Poland, even though it's a British film. But thank you so much for giving this opportunity to me. So I grew up in not a very privileged environment, and my mom was always, you can do it, I believe in you. She was always super motivating, and but then sometimes when she visited me here in the UK, she doesn't speak English. I was like, oh, it's a bit awkward, kind of feeling, uncomfortable feeling that I had.
You've done it's a gorgeous film, and I think as well there's these. They're short films, but they've got such big stories that they're telling, and they really connect in such a big way, I think, as well. Young, congratulations on your film as well. It's. I wanted to ask you about the inspiration behind the animation choice and how you decided to visually tell a story, because it is absolutely breathtaking.
일단은 저는 스타워즈에 대해서 정말 사실 잘 알고 있다라고 사실 이게 말하기가 좀 부끄러워서 열심히 스타워즈를 영상을 봤는데 이 영상을 보고 가장 눈에 띈 게 앞서도 말했지만 선과 악의 대립에 대해서 되게 눈에 들어왔어요. 그래서 저도 혹은 팬분들께서도 살아감에 있어서 내가 과연 어느 빛을 띠고 있는 사람인가에 대해서 자기 자신에 대해서 많이 궁금하고 혼란스러운 시기가 있었을 거예요. 그래서 저희가 스튜디오 미르가 만든 영상을 보고 과연 내가 갖고 있는 빛 혹은 앞으로에 대해서 어떻게 발전시켜 갈 건지, 그런 시련과 힘듦을 어떻게 다스릴지에 대해서 조금 뜨거운 뭔가를 받아주셨으면 좋겠습니다.
I didn't know much about Star Wars before working on this project, unfortunately. So I studied by watching a lot of Star Wars materials out there. And through that, I realized, which I said on the panel, the theme of contraposition of good and evil was the occurring theme. And for the fans and for us personally, I thought we could portray the reflection of ourselves growing up and going through different and difficult experiences. And what Studio Mirror wanted to show was how these characters manage these experiences and overcome them. So I hope it's received with great passion.
Thank you so much. Julian, Spy Dancer, it's a beautiful film, and the poetic nature of the animation and the performances in this are extraordinary. I wanted to ask whether, the voice work done by your actors, how much that inspired, the final film in a way throughout the process, at what point the voice actors come in, and if that did inspire.
It's good that you're asking the question, because I forgot to mention in the panel. So we have Camille Cotin and Lambert Wilson and Casey Chase playing the lead characters for our short, and they're mind-blowingly talented. It's like we wanted their rhythm and their charisma to add to the characters that we wrote, but they added so much more. Like our story is really relying on getting this emotion throughout for the audience. I always had the audience in mind, especially fans of Star Wars that are really demanding, and so yeah, it was the first thing that I said to the actors. Really, is like, forget it's a Star Wars story. We're telling a story.
Yeah.
And it's a story with characters that share a very special bond, and so we would talk about emotions all through the sets, the recordings, and we don't have lightsabers in our short, nor crazy space fights, so the fights had to be emotional, and so we had a lot of fun and attention to playing with these acting scenes, and I hope people will like it.
Yeah, it's very beautiful, absolutely. Melinda, hello. How was it creating a new planet, and what inspired you in terms of what that would be?
So for us, it's a very very important moment of life, because we are not only representing our studio, but we are also representing India and a huge culture and a lot of aspects of that. So when we started developing the story, first was we said either we have to make a story and fit it in Star Wars universe, or take Star Wars universe and fit it in India. So we said, let's take a step back and just write our own story. And we wanted to write something a lot on relationship and good versus a villain. And then we chose the sibling story. And when we wrote the story without thinking Star Wars, and then we presented to George, Jackie, and James, I think they instantly liked it. There were things about it was surprising for us, or a happy surprise for us, that there were so many fundamental things that we were thinking about story that were very synonymous with things that happens in the Star Wars world. Then we wanted to add the Star Wars elements into that. So while we are doing that, we did not wanted to, we wanted to make it very independent, though India could be an inspiration with colors, with foods and shapes and languages. So we thought, let's just create a new planet. And the planet is, I don't know if I'm supposed to say it, but The planet is called
Getting a nod.
Golak.
Yeah, please.
And I will share. I would love to show. I came up with this name. The planet is called Golak. So Golak means in Indian, Gola means round, and Lok means people. So we thought, let's just use this. And I have to say, I'm selfish here. I don't know if anybody's listening. That I want this planet or peoples to be used in some Star Wars film. So that's my hidden aspiration. So that's how we wanted to come up with something very unique and new to this franchise in our own way.
I think there's absolutely the idea that you're being inspired by this, but I think that when the storytellers within that kind of mainframe see all these films, it's going to inspire them hugely, because the stories and characters and situations you've come up with are absolutely wonderful. Arthur and Leandro, let's talk about The Pit. And I love your choice of animation for this story, and it's a real love story to animation as well as being a great story. I think that you can really see where your love of animation came from, with the idea that you're celebrating that kind of 80s, 90s sort of animation that I remember watching as a kid and kind of going, what's this? It's been nothing like I'd seen before. Where did you start in terms of when you were trying to think about how you were visually going to tell a story?
Yeah, so I think we always knew we wanted it to be 2D animation because of the kind of dual dynamic in the story. We have these two communities going in opposite directions, right? And that's something I feel like a lot of people can relate to. So I feel like that story just lends itself well to just 2D animation. And as we kind of talked to different studios, we met with The Art Stagio, and when I talked to Arthel, I think we just clicked right away, and I think we just knew what we were trying to accomplish with the message in the story, and the statement that we're trying to make with working with Arthel and his talented studio, and us creatively going in the direction that we did. So that was kind of the thought process behind it, and the rest was The Art Stagio's beautiful work. And of course, like I mentioned on the panel, we didn't want it to feel too cutting edge, because we didn't want it to feel like, we wanted to be in line with the message, which is an old message. It's not something new. So it felt right to have it kind of feel like a traditional anime, and for it to feel like it's something that we're familiar with, something we've seen before.
You're living the dream, by the way. I would love to move to Tokyo and follow the dream of making anime. And I mean, for growing up as well, in terms of uniting these worlds of Star Wars and anime, was that something that was just a joy to work on?
No, yeah, it was a joy, and I think, like you said, kind of living the dream. So I've been in Japan now for 17 years, and so it's like, I think the areas where my life and Star Wars has a parallel is that, so I went to Japan looking for, I don't know, the Force, I was like, I want to be this great animator, I want to be a great background artist, and it's all on the other side of the world. And so I went to Japan in search of a master, and it was the art director of Ghost in the Shell, and I was like, that's who I want to work for, and that's who, I couldn't see anything else, and then of course when I met him, he was just like, you're still a Padawan, you have many years to go. But then, so when I met DeAndre, and then we were talking about working on The Pit, just kind of how DeAndre wanted to, kind of call back to, the original ideas that kind of brought me in love with anime, and wanting to, and not only anime, but just love with animation and just the old hand drawings, and that was actually why I moved to Japan, was because it was one of the only countries that still used paint, and where every other country was kind of moving towards digital art, there I was like, I can still paint, and I can actually paint on paper, and so I think Leandre gave us that kind of freedom with The Pit, where we could still kind of use old techniques.
It's beautiful, really, really is. And Nadia and Daniel at the end, congratulations on the film, and it's such a sensual film. You feel like you can touch the characters in a way. It's just got this beautiful quality to it. And I was so interested hearing you talk on the panel about bringing your own personal experiences to it, but this idea of the voice, and that you used the voice to kind of make all the kind of everything within the film basically comes from the voice. Do you mind kind of going back and just talking a little bit about where that inspiration came from and the two of you? Because that was a lovely story in itself about the two of you coming together and finding this common ground in the middle of, wow, this is the story we both want to make.
Well, first of all, thank you. I think for us, Star Wars and the idea of the Force, it's like spiritual, you know. It's of spirit, and so for us, it was really about we had to come together and really talk about how us as individuals, like how we connect with that, you know, in our own unique ways, and. If you watch the film, it's you'll see that the landscapes are quite vast and, you know, it's quite beautiful. I say so myself. Which is very much inspired by, you know, Cape Town, where we come from, and the mountains and yeah. So for us, like, the way that we connect to the Force is sort of really taking in the beauty of the land that we come from. You know, just like living close to the mountain, getting to see it every day. So there's sort of that aspect of, you know, sort of connecting with the Force, and then. Like I mentioned, you know, on the stage, you know, in South Africa, there's so many cultures, and for me personally, I grew up in one culture, and then, you know, as I became an adult and I could make my own choices, I sort of shifted into other cultures and whatever. But something that stuck with me was like singing, you know, the singing. I grew up in a pretty staunch, like, Muslim environment and family, and it was always the men that were singing, you know, and it was beautiful, but it was always the men. And when I was a teenager, I we started a rock band, and we would do gigs, and we were underage in bars, and my father never knew anything about it, you know. But anyways, after that life as an adult, my singing has become so personal, and it's something that I do, you know, by myself, and sometimes I upload songs, but really it's for me, you know, and I've grown so much and learned so much about myself through songs. And I find that when I sing and record a song, I'll listen to it like 3 months later, and then I get the message, you know, and it like tears me apart, it builds me up, you know. So there's that idea of the voice, and Daniel's father as well, who plays multiple instruments, and he's like a walking dictionary of music, like international music. Like it was automatic, you know. How do we connect? We connect through the land, you know, visually, and just feeling the energy of the mountain, and then obviously through voice, through my personal relationship with singing. Yeah.
I can't really add much more.
I could do a whole panel talking to you all about the music in your films as well, but it's time for me to send over to our lovely audience and get some questions from them, and I can already, yes, I'm so glad, straight in there, great, we've got a microphone to you. Thank you, sir.
It's so fun to discover how the countries really outburst with your stories. I mean, the splashness of India, the deepness of France, the humor of Britain. But I want to ask Gabriel, I'm from Mexico, of course, Latin America. I don't know if I can do this in Spanish or I have to do it in English.
You could do it in Spanish, maybe if you can then just abbreviate so everybody else knows what you're asking.
I'm going to ask him about the family that is so important in Latin America, y no solo de la familia, del realismo mágico. ¿Te sorprendiste sacando estos temas tan latinoamericanos en tu cortometraje?
Tengo que responder. I have to, because my brain shifted to Spanish. So, I have to respond in English, right? Yeah.
No.
If you can, so the rest of the room can understand. If you can, there'd be.
We did the conversion to think about these themes that are very natural for us as Latin Americans, and as I was saying, it was something that I have seen all my life, and I think it was very something that it wasn't hard for us to get to that story, because it was a story that grew up with. So we just had to discover that this story fitted perfectly in the Star Wars universe. So it was something very natural that came very easy for us to find the kind of story that we wanted to tell.
Gracias.
Can I add something really quickly, just for the to kind of bring this all together? Because if you noticed, each one of these storytellers, their story was personal.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't let's do a spectacle in Star Wars. I think people a lot of the times are asking us what are you looking for in these visions, and what we're looking for is the personal story that you could strip all the Star Wars out of it, and there's still to be a character story that's absolutely relatable. And I think each one of these stories achieves that, and I think that's really the heart and soul of this anthology.
Yeah, beautifully put. Can we go to the third row there, and then we'll get another one at the back there? Thank you.
Hey everybody, I'm curious about boundaries, because there obviously are very personal stories, and but then you saw that Arvin had Wedge Antilles in it. So I'm wondering, sort of like what parameters kind of Lucasfilm gives to them, and then if any of the filmmakers pitched anything so crazy Star Wars that even Lucasfilm said no about.
Yeah, did you set any boundaries for your filmmakers? Was there limitations at all?
Why don't you take this? I mean, we can share.
Like we just said, James just said, I think it all starts from the personal story. So I think we try to excavate what that personal relationship is, and then go from there. And if there are questions about time frame or any of that, we can kind of discuss. I think once everyone discovers the shorts, they'll kind of see where they could potentially live. But here's the thing: they all feel very much of a piece with Star Wars. And as far as Aardman goes, I think the Aardman humor gives us a little bit of license to be a little playful and winky with ourselves. And we've done a little bit of that in our Lego content in the past, and think just it is that sort of British humor.
Yeah, and we also provide reference. Like once we know what their story is, we'll provide all the reference of what kind of costuming would be there at that moment, or ships or lightsabers. So there's guardrails like that, but it's very minimal.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think we see ourselves as dramaturgs, and we're there to help them get the best, to make their story the best as possible. I think our preference is not to tell stories about known characters. We really, one of the fun things about this initiative is to see new characters being created, and those personal stories. But with like a Wedge Antilles, or even in the first volume, there's definitely Boba Fett and Jabba the Hutt, and I think we're okay with that if it is organic to the story. If it actually has to be there and has a
and they're not the driving force, right? They're brand new characters that are driving the story.
Wedge is the flight. Magda, you should speak to this, but Wedge is the flight academy lead. Makes sense.
Yeah. So we were looking for someone to be like an idol that Annie, the daughter, is looking up to, and we're discussing different characters, but Wedge was definitely one of.
And there's some Easter eggs too, right? In Annie's room.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, in her bunk bed, there's lots of little detail everywhere, but there are posters of Wedge.
But I love you. There's creative licensing. Rodrigo, you were talking about creating a new lightsaber, and that's kind of like there's various kind of interpretations of lightsabers throughout quite a number of the films and stuff, and they've all got a unique voice and dance and movement and design as well.
Yeah, no. Again, that is the part of what the question was too, and what James was saying. I think it's important. At least I don't know. I cannot talk for everyone on the table, but at least for me, I was not approaching this, with this idea of making something culturally specific. I was, really drawing of, things that kind of give me inspiration in terms of storytelling and things that I like personally, right? So I think that's where those specific things come through, and also I feel like in terms of boundaries, for my taste, I approach it where again, we're definitely pushing the intensity, but at the same time, I grew up with Star Wars and I went through to the movies when I was, 8, 10. I really wanted to embrace that kind of family viewing, where you can actually sit down with your kid and enjoy this together. And I think that is part of the inherited mythology that Star Wars created. And it's, I think, part of the joy, and we see it in the celebration, right, when you're going through the hallway. That's actually part that is, and again, you kind of like, at this idea of like bringing you a new take, for the lightsaber, at least in my case, we went through kind of medieval research, and we went through swordsmanship that is so big in Spain, Toledo, and all the schools, and in terms of so we look at El Cid as a reference in terms of the hilt and the fine, those kind of crafts that these makers put on those objects. We thought, and I think part of that connects directly to the artistry of Lucasfilm and what they did with Star Wars. Is they put a lot of love into the design, onto the thought behind the design and the functionality of that design, and that's a great a way to bridge and bring some of your inspiration when you grew up, right?
Did anybody else on the panel want to pick up, and then I'll go to the next question? I'll go to the next question. Gentleman at the back there.
Hi, I'm from an Italian website, and my question is for the producers, because you mentioned the fact that the first season was so successful, so you decided to renew and choose a new idea for the second season. And obviously, this could go on and on and on because the concept is very interesting. So, being Italian, I think Italy could have an interesting perspective on Star Wars. So, do you already have any idea about the third season, or are you going to wait next month?
Yeah, I think we have to see how it's received, how it does. Look, we can say our personal bias.
We hope
we
so.
Love this. We love this, and there is amazing work in Italy right now, and such artistic work that it's definitely a place that we'd love to mine. But again, everything is dependent on reaction. You just never know. I think we have something really special here. We'll wait and find out.
Oh, I'm thinking of all the great Italian stories now, like from World War II.
Thank you for your question. We've got a question here. Great shirt, by the way. Can I just say this?
I noticed Journey to the Dark Head was announced as being set at the dawn of the Jedi many years ago. Was that parallel thinking that there's going to be a movie in that same time period, or was it something deliberate where you're now investigating that time period that we haven't looked at before?
I'll let Park answer that, but I would say it doesn't take place at the dawn of the Jedi.
Oh, okay.
It's more during the sort of Old Republic Sith War.
Oh, okay.
Young, you want to pick up on that?
Could you repeat that question, please?
I was thinking that it was more on the dawn of the Jedi, but it was more the setting and how you came to that setting. The time period.
일단은 스타워즈의 이야기가 너무 탄탄하고 그리고 그 문화를 사랑하는 팬분들이 너무 많으시기 때문에 그 문화를 함부로 건드리고 싶지가 않았어요. 그래서 그 이전 고대 시대의 스타워즈의 문화를 조금 더 제가 해석할 수 있는 여지를 만들기 위해서 시대를 3000년 전, 그러니까 스타워즈 에피소드 1에서 3000년 전으로 가정을 해서 작업을 했습니다.
So because Star Wars has a great fandom and they just love everything about it, I didn't really want to touch it in case it offends the fandom. So to give me that creativity, that freedom of creativity, I thought I would set the time 3,000 years before episode 1 of the film aired.
Thank you.
Good choice. Good choice. We've got a question over here. Please, second row, if that's okay, and then we'll come to you next. Thank you. Thank you.
Hi, my question was for James, Jackie, and Josh. I'm curious about the human element of what you do as producers. What you bring to sort of the gate of the collaboration are some iconic quantities, some known elements, the lightsabers, the planets. But what all these incredible artists bring is specific, and it's that marriage that I think is really beautiful. You don't know them until you start this collaboration. How does their personal lived experience as human beings, as well as studio heads, as well as artists, inform something that you live with every day? What are you taking away from that, and why is it important to deal with people and not just business directors and things like that?
I think we should all answer this, actually. I mean, I think it comes down to the creative voice. Truly, I think there are studios we love. Like I said on the panel, we are huge fans of all of these studios up here. We love the work, but it's not like we're instantly getting into a production deal with them for visions. We had conversations, and we shared values, and we got a sense of what storytelling types are in their heart and what they want to say and how they look at Star Wars. And I think we're always surprised. First off, everybody has the story of what the first time they saw Star Wars. And that's such a beautiful, like, cultural currency no matter where you are. I have that story too. But I think it comes down to the human element. That's just the way we approach storytelling. I think we always make the calls to the studios we thought were great, but depends on the conversation.
Yeah, and I think it goes back, because Star Wars is truly a global phenomenon. I think it goes back to George Lucas and what he created and gave the world based on all the stuff he watched and grew up with. And it's become, like I said, so universal. So there is a familiarity sorry, to it. So when you're having a conversation with a studio for the first time, like James said, it's an easy conversation starter. What are your first memories of Star Wars? And it's an instant connection that just gets you talking.
Yeah, and it's a real two-way street, because these are really exceptional producers who've been in Lucasfilm for a long time, and so there's no fear in their eyes when they're talking to you. They're like, they had such trust, so they were secure and confident and good producers there a long time. Knew what they're talking about, so it was able to make us feel very confident as well about doing what we're doing. That's a rare quality.
I love what you said about bringing the personal in, because they're not just writers, they're people with stories. And a couple of the pitches I remember just made me cry, so it's really connecting with, and I just think Star Wars for me is so much about the oppressed versus the oppressor, dark versus light. And when you get that perspective from different cultures, because everyone has had it in their country, unfortunately, their stories are so original and unique. So it's just been a really fulfilling process, and we've got amazing people up here at this table.
Truly, and all of them had something to say.
Yeah.
So there's something to say from their first pitch, something that mattered to them to tell the world, and their storytelling is where art comes from.
Thank you. Great question. Thank you. Just the gentleman in the car behind, please. Thanks.
Hello. My question is for Magda. Names of your characters clearly are inspired by Polish culture, Dorota, Karina, Zuzia. And I wonder, is there more references to Poland in your episode of Visions? Bo byłem tak podekscytowany w trakcie seansu, że wydaje mi się, że mogłem coś pominąć.
Let me just think. There are the names. I was definitely inspired by, in general with Star Wars, like looking at the visuals, thinking that they are very much like Zdzisław Beksiński paintings. They're literally, when you put some of them next to each other, they are so similar. And the whole visual world was incredible, just sailing in this wonderful visual Star Wars world. And, Karina, Zuzia, the whole personal story, it's kind of growing up during the communism, and kind of, very different background, and then moving the planet, the country. So it's really rooted, in our culture, in a way, but then I had to mix it really with, I had to marry Star Wars, Artman, and my personal story. So there had to be lots of British inspirations as well.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Dziękuję.
If we can go down the front and then in the front row there, and then we'll come just one row behind. Thank you.
I feel like from a general audience perspective, when people think of animation studios, they think of studios in California or Japan. But the thing I love about this, it fills in the gaps in between for people. So is that kind of on your mind when you were developing, like, who should we reach out to about filling in the gaps for the rest of the world?
I mean, the truth is, animation can come from everywhere, and it does come from everywhere. And you know, I know there's a couple of very large or big studios that are very well known, but it's nice to get a family-run studio from Chile, and an incredible Spanish filmmaker like Rodrigo Blas, and at the very tip of Africa with Triggerfish. So it was, instead of filling in the gaps, it was more, I hope that people do realize that there is great animation all over the world, and it speaks to all cultures.
Now more than ever.
Yeah.
There's just great work everywhere.
Thank you. And then just behind. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Chase, aka That Gay Jedi, and my question is for Leandre. I wanted to ask, you mentioned during the panel that coming up for the idea of the pit, it kind of came to you during the pandemic and during civil rights protests. And I wanted to ask you, like, to be writing so personally during such an intense time, like, how have you changed as a storyteller while working on the pit, and how has it maybe informed the way that you experience Star Wars as a fan?
Yeah, good question, because that was a strange time for everyone, right? I feel like that was kind of a palate cleanser where we all had to rethink everything in our lives, how we do everything, and that changed for me creatively too, how I saw storytelling and what stories I felt like needed to be told, because it was clear around that time that there were certain perspectives that not only weren't being heard, but they weren't understood. And I think it was a great opportunity to kind of make a piece of content that hopefully will make it easier for people to understand and share a perspective and bring something different to the table, right, in the Star Wars universe. Because we have so much content, so much great content, but we have this huge sandbox, and it's just a great opportunity to offer a different perspective that maybe we haven't seen yet, and to connect it to a real world issue like what was happening during the pandemic, and do it naturally, not force it, because Star Wars has those themes. Those themes were happening when George wrote it in the 70s, and some of those same issues were still happening today. So it's kind of like the stars aligned, and when you're home and you don't have anything else to do, I just felt like this was a great, passionate thing that I felt like I wanted to say, and I'm just glad that Lucasfilm gave me the opportunity to actually do it, and credit to James, Jackie, and Josh for kind of allowing Visions for allowing the pit to be a part of Visions to be able to tell that story.
Thank you so much. We've got a question. Sorry. Getting up your step, can't stay, and those lunges, they're great. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, going back to the process, the beginning of when you get the second season green light and you have the whole war in your hands, how do you choose between one country and another? Because maybe because there isn't a studio that because there isn't a story that you want to tell or differentiate from other ones. And then I want to ask a question for Rodrigo, being Spanish. That your process also, what was the first thing you thought about the story or about the references? Because you have to tell Picasso, El Cid, Toledo. So what was first?
Oh, it was. I don't know. It was an incredibly hard process. We could only do so many films with this anthology, and there are many other studios that we want to work with, and hopefully will someday. So the answer was it was incredibly hard.
It was hard. It's also, we definitely wanted something from South America, or Central America, I was aware of Punk Robot because of Bear Story, a short they did previously, which won the Academy Award. It was really beautiful and emotional, and I didn't know a lot of other studios, but we researched, we looked at a lot, but the emotion that they pulled out of a short was so right up our alley. So yeah, so it wasn't like I was eliminating countries. It was like, okay, I need something from this continent and this continent.
Yes, that's true too. I mean,
Yeah.
that is something that we wanted to factor in. Is it, as much as it was finding the right stories, we wanted to make sure that really the story of this anthology in total was a celebration of filmmaking voices from across the world, and so we didn't want to be any continent-centric in a way. We wanted to make sure that there
I wish we could have made 20 James.
That's the third volume.
It sounds like, yeah. Hey, that's a great idea.
James is it. Rodrigo, did you want to answer the second part
Sure,
of that question, please?
I'll tell you where the idea came from. It actually is very personal, right? It's, during the pandemic, we finally were able to go out, and it was inspired by a moment with my daughter, actually. She was 10, and we were, again, we're gonna go out. She gets, it was cold, she gets some flip-flops, and I tell, like, a parent will say, like, you're not going out with those flip-flops. And she was 10, and she looked at me with a different way that I haven't seen her. And she said that I am going with this flip-flops. She said it very simple, right, this way, and I kind of saw her change in that moment, like, almost like, disobey or disobedience, or like, reassuring herself that, this is her choice. So it's really about a choice, like, and you'll see the short is like, she made that choice before the short, and it's actually the consequences of what that choice she made.
Love that. And we've got, you've been waving at me lots, I'm so sorry, and this is our last question. I'm sorry we're running out of time, but the gentleman there in the second row. Thank you. Thanks.
Hi, my question is for Milind. Star Wars has had a really long tradition of Indian influence, from spiritual philosophies all the way to how major characters just get their names. But I think, for your film, it really felt like the first visceral representation of Indian culture in a galaxy far, far away. So I was just kind of wondering how, or what specifically you would like to communicate about sort of the vibrancy of Indian culture, of history, both to fans who may not know much about it, but also fans like myself who are now excited to connect more deeply with their heritage through the lens of Star Wars.
Yeah, thank you for asking that question and giving me the opportunity to talk. There are actually two parts to this question I'll answer. The number one is, it's like I said, it's one of the oldest civilization on the earth, and there's just a plethora of stories and cultures and this ancient mythology out there. I feel our job is to take that stories and put them on a global platform so the global audiences can relate. So we as a studio, we feel responsible for doing that. The second part also in that the challenge is that because they're so culturally unique, the moment it has to go and travel the boundary and come on the global platform, it has not happened before. And actually I should take pride in that. This is in fact the first indigenous film that is coming out of India. So we have this real pressure of what are we exactly showcasing, right? Because if we just add colors, food, festivals, Bollywood, music, everything together, there's a thin line that not everybody can relate to it. So we have to make our choices as to what is that color or food I can relate to and you can relate to. As an example, the entire film revolves around a small sweet, which is we have given our version of it at. It's just a small girl wanting just to eat. It's a very innate innocence feeling out there, and how the stories evolve around that. So when we are trying to do that, we felt that that can happen anywhere, in any country. So we try to take just enough references rather than making it overtly Indian, but make a very bold attempt of showing these things. And the second part of that is,
we as a studio at Take Pictures, that our goal is to inspire filmmakers from India to get the stories and show it on a global platform, and so that audiences can know that stories exist, a filmmaker exists, the culture exists, that is to be seen by the worldwide audience. I hope, pray to God, with this film, I think we'll be able to do that. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you for your question. Thank you for all your questions. Thank you for your wonderful Paul. So
Can I just make a correction before I get in real trouble with the people at Boyle, County Roscommon? I just wanted to say, because I talked about the story being I came from a bad place, but Boyle, County Roscommon in the west of Ireland is a beautiful town. And I had a wonderful childhood there, and it's nothing like the place that our character comes from in the short. I'm just aware of that. I know people in Boyle, they'll give me trouble about that.
You also
just wanted to clear it up.
And also, you can't say who the big Hollywood person is in your film if you want.
Yeah, okay, yeah, we have Angelica Houston.
There you go. Wow. There you go.
So, because she's a big Irish connection.
Yeah. You'll have to watch it to find out. That's all you're going to get. May the 4th, everybody. You're in for such a treat with these wonderful, beautiful films and stories from this extraordinarily talented bunch of people. Thank you for sharing your stories. Congratulations. Please, huge round of applause for our wonderful vision focus. Thank you so much.